Well, hello out there on the interwebs, and welcome to the Lewd Lycanthrope channel. I'm your howling good host, Chuck Duclaw. Well, folks, it's a new day, a new year, and of course, a new channel. Today, we're diving into the wild world of Reddit. You know, that sewage cesspool that everybody likes to spill their tea on? Well, that's also where the stories are crazy and captivating and just awesome to listen to. Get ready for some jaw-dropping ones, too. Head-scratching. I'm talking downright messed-up tales that will leave you questioning humanity. From bizarre relationships to unbelievable encounters, we've got a lineup of stories that are sure to entertain and shock you. So grab your snacks, settle in, and let's jump into these insane Reddit stories together, because you truly won't believe what actually happened. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you never miss a wild ride with us. And that being said, let's get into the stories. All right, our first story comes from submitter Jim. All right, Jim, way to reach into the box there for internet handles. So I'm on the train from DC to New York, and there are two people in the car, Jim and me. So hold on a second. Your name's Jim, and you're in the car with Jim. So it's two Jims. Okay, whatever. Anyway, moving on. I made polite conversation to pass the time with him, and he seemed pretty normal at first. I plugged my headphones in after a bit and started taking a quick nap. I woke up to him screaming in my face. Not your average screaming, no. There was spittle flying everywhere. I could actually taste the onion sub he had for lunch. I asked him, in a panic, what was wrong. He thought that I had stolen his dead wife's wedding ring. He whipped out his pocket knife on me, and at this point I'm praying that I don't die. I managed to calm him down and reassure him that I didn't take the ring. I helped him look forward in the car, but couldn't find it. Just when I thought that he was going to start acting normal again, he drops this bombshell on me. We're going to take the train. I freaked the fuck out. What do you mean we're going to take the train? What the fuck do you mean? Apparently, he wanted to hijack the train because he thought that the conductor had stolen his dead wife's wedding ring. Now, like most people, I don't want to go to federal pound-me-in-the-ass prison, so I tried to talk him out of it. Tried to persuade him to not get us sent to jail for hijacking, because for some reason I'm sure that I'll take the blame too. And a conductor finally walks in the room. I explained the situation to him, and they got the police to take care of the guy at the next stop. Well, that was an interesting way to start it off. Hijack the train. Yeah, talk about escalating quickly. Just goes to show you never really understand the crazy in people until it comes out, and it usually comes out when you least expect it. But hey, not a bad story. Thanks, Jim. Moving into story number 2, we have submitter Euphoric Atrophy. I play in a metal band in New Plymouth, New Zealand. A guy named Tim Parlane moved up here from Wellington and was looking to join a band here. He was in a few bands down there, so he started seeing a girl we knew who ran a company making shirts for bands here in New Zealand, so we met him through her. He expressed a big interest in joining my band, so we auditioned him and taught him a few songs. As time went on, it became very apparent that he was, fucking crazy. He never smiled. Even when he laughed, he kept a straight face, so he just had weird twitches, etc., etc. He essentially failed to fit in with us, despite being quite good on the guitar and as a vocalist. So in the end, I told him that we appreciated the effort, but he would be better suited to form his own band or be in another band somewhere else. Cut to a month later, playing a gig in Wellington. Tim shows up at our gig, walks directly in front of the crowd, and just fucking death stares me during the entire set. Never once looked away. To say it was intimidating would be a vast understatement. After a while, him and the girl he was seeing broke up, and he moved back to Wellington. About 3 weeks after that, a high-profile musician in Wellington was stabbed to death in his sleep. I jokingly said to people that Tim probably did it because he's a fucking fruitcake. Well, turns out I was most likely right.
Tim broke down to one of his friends and said that he had done it with 2 knives, and he hid all the evidence and the weapons. The girl he told went straight to the police, of course, who called him in for questioning all night. When he was released, he sent the girl a text message that just said, "Disappointing." He then proceeded to throw himself in front of a train. Okay. Well, euphoric. That was a that was one of those stories. As I was reading it, I was going along, going, "Well, this is just not going to have a real great ending on it." And then they just throw you that nice little cliffhanger there at the end. Wow. Mental illness. I read an article a year or so ago about how artists, not just musical artists, but artists, any kind of artists in general, whether it be woodworking or painting or drawing or music or anything along the artistical line, they suffer a higher rate of mental disorders, but depression, stuff like that, than just about any other profession. Because it takes a lot of internal strife, I guess, to produce beautiful art. I can see how that's possible. But interesting article I read, interesting story, and thanks a lot, Euphoric, for sharing that with us. So story number 3 is going to have some triggering content for people, and I'm going to warn you about that up front. While I am lewd and don't really care, I don't want to trigger any kind of post-traumatic stress or bad memories of people. So this next story does contain the big R word. So if that is a triggering subject for you, I would suggest either fast forwarding through this or muting it. But that being said, for the rest of us, this next story comes from submitter Little Praying Mantis. It says, "My first year of college, kind of lonely as fuck because now I'm 18, still never had a boyfriend. I was a photography major taking random photos with my chunky DSLR when I noticed a group of hot guys tossing a football across from me. One hot one came over and introduced himself to me, and I quickly knew where this was going. He said, 'Hey, my friend over there thinks you're kind of cute. The one in the white shirt.' So I looked over and I saw a guy in a white shirt. He was almost a midget. He had to be like 4'11" with short arms and legs. And just before you ask, according to the internet, a midget is legally an inch shorter. So a midget is 4'10"? That seems awful tall for a midget. Anyway, I didn't want to laugh and turn him down, so we became friends. I even snapped a photo of him. One day I had no classes for 3 hours and it was pouring outside, so everyone was inside with nowhere to sit. He said his house was a few minutes away and his aunt was home, so we can go there. I hesitated a lot, but hey, why not? I was bored. His house was a half an hour away in the middle of Farmville Bumblefuck, completely secluded in the woods. With it being dark and raining, I felt this was kind of a red flag or sign. We got there and he lied. Nobody was home. Red flag number 1. I put my backpack down. I noticed pictures of him wrangling baby cows and shit. I asked him, what the fuck was this? And apparently, he's a cowboy in competitions. He was a midget cowboy. Literally the most fucking random thing ever. Then, while watching TV on the sofa, he popped a chicken nugget boner and tried to pull a move on me to force sex. He was trying to wrangle me like one of the cows. After some struggle, I jumped off the couch and pulled out my handy-dandy box cutter for situations like this. You know, a midget cowboy trying to big R you. I told him to drive me back to the school or else I'll stab him. He dropped me off, yelled cunt, drove off. Apparently his friends said that he uses his shortness to pick up chicks and they usually pity fuck him. I still have that photo on the camera. When my friends don't believe the fact that he was a midget, I show them. I still keep the box cutter on me as well. You never know when another midget with a chicken nugget boner is going to come after you. Chicken nugget boner. I'm not going to lie, that when I read this one for the first time, I couldn't stop laughing. I was giggling like a schoolgirl. But, you know, the big R is not funny. And it really doesn't matter how big of a person you are, whether you're 6'6" and 300 pounds, or you're 4'10" and 100 pounds. That's not right. And I truly hope that she would have had enough common sense to go to the authorities after this. But it doesn't look like she did. There was no post-edit for this particular thread. So, yeah, that's crazy midget cowboy tries to big R someone. You know, that's one I can honestly say I've never heard before. But hey, great story, and thanks for putting it on there for us, little praying mantis. Moving into story 4, it's going to be one of my favorite subject matters, and that is stupid people and drugs. So for anybody that dives into this kind of stuff on the internet on a frequent basis, you know that a lot of the stories begin that way. But I digress. Let's move on. So this story comes from Cosmo Ceratops. Let me start off by saying Cosmo, awesome internet handle. I mean, that stellar. Right up there, man. Anyway, he starts off by saying, I was baked and singing karaoke when a fight broke out. Okay, right off the bat, way to start a story. First sentence, you have my attention. I had sung karaoke before, but only a handful of times. I also chose songs that were more talking with a style than actual singing. All through my first song, We Didn't Start the Fire, the little thing that bobs along to the words was like half a beat off, so I was second-guessing myself the entire time. In spite of that, I decided it would be good to do actual singing, so I submitted Round Here by the Counting Crows. Round Here by the Counting Crows. Okay, man, you must have been high. Anyway, first, for you listeners out there, if you are not familiar with that song, I highly suggest you look it up and listen to 20 or 30 seconds of it. And while it is not a bad song, it is a depressing and whiny song, and very niche-y in my opinion. But getting back to the story here. So first off, not a good karaoke choice. No, I agree with you there, Cosmo. Not very upbeat or well-known enough to make up for that. Second, I was baked out of my mind. Also a very important detail. And I had never been in that state while singing to a room full of people. Yeah, I'm sure a lot of people have not been in that state while singing to a room full of people. Third, the bar was a shithole. I have a theory that the bar's only karaoke was when their balls were an inch from a bandsaw and it was a last-ditch effort to remain solvent or make some money. So I'm up there emoting, she wants to meet a boy who looks like Elvis. That's a lyric, by the way. And don't make fun of my singing. That wasn't on tone or even the way the song sounds. I don't know. Anyway, when I hear this smash, some lady broke a beer mug over some guy's head. They're rolling around the floor like 10 feet away from me, and I have no idea what to do. So I just keep singing. Yeah, because that's a great idea. You know, there's a bar fight kicking off. You're just gonna serenade them. All right. More people jump on the dog pile, trying to separate the two. There's 10 people in there total. And through it all, I'm just tenderly serenading. That's what you're doing. Tenderly serenading the bar with this song. This goes on for a while, screaming, feeble, and desperate attempts to swing at each other with people trying to hold them back and me trying my best to keep it together and just stay in tone. The DJ finally cuts me off right at the good part. Very, very, very late in the song, I would say. But turns it off. Turns out he was also the bouncer and that he was one of the first ones to dive right in. He comes to me after the whole thing ends and bloodied and bruised and says, "Hey, you want me to start that over?" I said, "Well, hell no, man. How in the hell am I supposed to top that?" Well, yeah. I guess the thing that makes this the most funny to me is not necessarily that there was a half-baked guy singing karaoke. I'm sure that's not too abnormal. But it was the fact of the song he was singing, which in my mind I almost think that was the reason the bar fight started, because that song is so depressing. But you know what? Either way, Great story, Cosmo, and appreciate you putting that on there for us. Right, our fifth and final story comes to us from submitter Dickus Rippus. Oh, man. Great name, man. Great name. So Dickus says, once upon a time, my grandma died, making the high point of the worst night of my life. Oh, boy. Once again, great way to rope me in on the first sentence. I was at uni at the time, and it was late one evening that I received the call that I had been dreading for weeks. My grandmother had mentally never faltered over the years, a solid rock of intelligence that had slowly become bound to her chair as she got older. So her death shocked me in a way that nothing else really ever has. I felt like I'd come adrift from reality, that a fundamental law of the universe had been broken. After all, she's always been there. It didn't make sense for her to die. And as such sought solace in my friends and, just as importantly, the alcohol my friends possessed. Small note, I was in Scotland and received the call around 10:30 p.m. Scotland prohibits off-license alcohol sales between 10 p.m. and 10 a.m., so I couldn't just get some from the shop. Good to know. I didn't know that about Scotland. Anyway, I went around to... Oh, by the way, before I move into it, he is eloquently putting the story together too, by the way. I really like the way he typed this out. I went around to said friends, a group of girls whose flat I often crashed at after parties where we talked and drank and watched some Pokemon. And they gradually drifted off to bed until it was just me and a girl we'll call H. Only a few weeks ago, H had a crush on me and it had been discovered, so between the alcohol lowering our inhibitions and our intent to keep me distracted from Grandma's death, we found ourselves helping each other undress in her bedroom. Funny how that happens, isn't it? For whatever reason, we decided to skip the condom and go straight to the fun bit, despite her having a shoebox full of condoms, as I found out later anyway. But this time, something was wrong. As soon as it, and by it I mean my dick, went in, I felt pain. Like something had torn through the skin. And when I stopped, H had pulled it out and we discovered blood everywhere and an 1.5 inch long tear in my foreskin. Note, this wasn't the frenulum or the banjo string, I guess is what people refer that to, that snapped, which means men suffer that at some point, and he is right there. A lot of men do suffer that. With or without the frenulum breve, but an actual tear in the side of my foreskin. Ooh. And by the way, that thing that men, they're basically talking about a bent dick. I mean, you're bending the dick back, or that's what they're talking about. Anyway, I immediately responded to the situation as any sensible person would by going into shock and then dry heaving. Well, honestly, man, I can tell you this, you probably handled it better than I would have. But anyway, H responded by panicking about how to get me to a hospital without letting her roommates know that I just tore my dick while we were having sex. Not just because of how embarrassing the situation was, but also because she had a boyfriend who was currently in Ireland. Once I'd pulled myself together and got dressed so I didn't have to look at the poor mutilated abomination that had just until recently been my pride and various girls' joy. I suggested that we tell them that I nearly fainted and started throwing up. True-ish. And while we thought it was just the shock of my grandma's death hitting me, not true, we were going to run down to the hospital to check it out. True, but referring to a different it. Thankfully, they bought it, or if they didn't, they haven't brought it up since, and we made our escape to the hospital. Out the front door we stepped to find that the weather had decided to match my misery with pouring rain and gale-force winds. We ran around the corner into the car and set off for the hospital. Some of you will be familiar with Edinburgh, so when I say we were going to A&E from Slateford, we'll immediately know our route choice. Edinburgh Bypass, for those unfamiliar. The bypass is a dual carriageway that more or less encircles Edinburgh, and like any motorway in the UK, it's fairly inaccessible on foot. A point of significance that should let you make a guess as to where this is going. The car's going to break down. Sure enough, about a mile along the bypass, we hear a clunk and start to decelerate. H's car was around 15 years old and fully expected to break down completely within the next year, but having it happen at such an inconvenient time was, well, incredibly inconvenient. Yeah, that's a good way of putting it. Luckily, this being the age of mobile phones, we could call H's roommates, explain that the car had broken down, and get a number for a taxi firm from them. The taxi company, however, refused to pick us up, saying that we were about a mile down from the A71 junction westbound, and that wasn't precise enough for it to be worth them sending a taxi out. Apparently, I can only suppose they and the company we called them after didn't trust their drivers to find the only broken down car, and probably the only car, period, on the bypass at the time. We, however, were growing increasingly cold, and with that being in the middle of the night, it was Scotland, by the way, in late autumn, during the storm, and we were also relieved when the third company agreed to send the car out only with a small amount of pleading. Well, after the shortest wait, the taxi arrived and whisked us to our salvation, the A&E hospital. So, I don't know, that's kind of weird. Why would a taxi company turn down a fare, even if it's a small one? But maybe I don't understand UK taxis. Anyway, upon entering A&E, we found it to be surprisingly devoid of drunks for the middle of the night, and so H went off to call the police and report her car so it could be collected. And when I went up to the front desk, where I had to tell two very professional middle-aged ladies my full name and date of birth, that I had torn my foreskin having sex, and that no, I wasn't using protection when it happened, they handed me a printed sheet of paper, told me to go through some double doors, and to hand the paper to the first nurse I encountered. I went through the doors, saw lots of people in color-coded scrubs, and not having a clue what they meant, walked up to someone who didn't look too busy and asked if they were a nurse. No, he replied, taking the paper, but I'll take a gander for you. On seeing the actual contents of the paper, a look of horror crossed his face, a slight widening of the eyes, and a drop of the corners of his mouth. Yeah, I'm pretty sure any guy you tell that story to is going to have that exact same look on their face. Doctors and nurses everywhere, please make sure your poker face is better than his was. Because knowing your injuries freak out medical professionals does not inspire the slightest bit of confidence. Yeah, I would agree with you 100% on that. I'm not sure if this needs an examination or not, he managed to say, which was obviously overheard when a land whale of a matron snatched it out of his hands with a "Give me a look, I'll tell you if it needs examining." The land whale had no sympathy at all. Again, doctors and nurses, don't be this way. You may have seen something 1,000 times before, but that doesn't make it any less bad for the patient. That's very true. But did tell me it would need an examination and offered me the choice of a male or a female doctor to look at it. As I wanted even a slight shred of sympathy, I opted for a male doctor, and shortly after was pulling my trousers down for a young man who was very carefully trying to not show any emotion. And I will give full credit to him. On seeing the damage, he only winced a little bit. Quick bio lesson, dicks are mostly made up of spongy white tissue that expands when filled with blood. So when you tear a hole in the side of it, it looks infected and pussy, a lot worse than it actually is. Okay, I think I could have went the rest of my life without knowing that fact. Wow. Okay. Anyway, he informed me that it would heal on its own, but it needed to be washed 3 or 4 times a day and to not engage in any form of sexual activity for the next 2 weeks. He left, I dressed, and while walking out, saw a gaggle of male and female doctors talking to the one who had just seen me. The women were giggling like 12-year-old girls, and the men had a variety of pained and horrified expressions. I walked out of there knowing that I had provided a story of the variety of pain and horrified expressions that I had given them. I walked out of there also knowing that would entertain and horrify the hospital staff for at least the next week. And that was without any of the backstory. I also walked out pretty much as I had entered, in a significant amount of discomfort, so after finding H, we immediately jumped into a taxi and went to our respective homes so I could metaphorically lick my wound. I'm glad you threw that in there. Metaphorically lick my wound until it had healed enough for her to literally lick it. Oh, man. Okay. Epilogue. 2 weeks later, everything had healed and was fully functioning, bar a new centimeter or so scar on little Dickus Rippus. I celebrated by successfully having sex with H and then going back to sleeping around as usual. Ever since that night, when I'm out with friends and one of them starts whining about how their day has just been the worst, I'm happy to say once upon a time my grandma died, marking the high point of the worst night of my life. People tend to stop whining pretty quickly when I start in on the story. I bet they do, Dick. I bet they do. And the fact that you named yourself Dickus Rippus is just cherry on top of that cake, man. So well done on that. Great story. Great. You put that together really well, too. Hands down, probably one of the biggest fears of every man is for something to happen to Captain One Eye. So, yeah, that is I'm still, it's toiling around in my brain though, is how it actually happened. You put it in her vagina, which I'm assuming wasn't dry sandpaper full of razor blades. And then you somehow ripped your dick, the side of your foreskin on your dick. Yeah, I don't know. That's almost supernatural. How did that happen? But anyway, great story, Dickus. Appreciate you guys living through that and then sharing it with us. So I'm sure that was an interesting night for you and H. But yeah, thank you for that.
And there you have it, folks. Those were some of the most mind-boggling, jaw-dropping, messed up stories we've come across. If you've enjoyed this wild ride through the bizarre and the unbelievable, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more crazy content. Share your thoughts in the comments below. What story shocked you the most? Have you had any messed up tales of your own? We'd love to hear them. But until then, stay frosty, folks, and we will see you guys again on the next adventure.